She was born when horses still outnumbered cars, when radios were a novelty and the idea of living past 100 was almost unheard of. But somehow Ethel did more than just survive. She lived through 2 world wars, the invention of the internet, and even a global pandemic. At 115 years old, Ethel Caterham has just been recognized as the oldest living person in the world. But that title only scratches the surface. Behind the wrinkles and warm smile is a story that wins through continents, heartbreak, deep love, and quiet resilience. How does a woman live through 11 decades and still find joy in birdsong and sunlit mornings? What lessons does she carry that most of us miss in the rush of life? This isn't just a story about age, it's about choosing life over and over again. Hit like, subscribe, and let's go. Ethel grew up in the rolling green hills of Hampshire, England, in a modest home filled with the sounds of laughter, the clatter of dishes, and the steady rhythm of family life. She was the second youngest of 8 children, often lost in the shuffle but never overlooked. Her days were simple, helping her mother hang laundry, gathering eggs from the henhouse, reading by candlelight when the electricity flickered. There was a quiet steadiness in her world, a rhythm that made every Sunday roast, every garden bloom, feel like something sacred. Yet, even in those early years, Ethel carried a restlessness. She loved the land, but her eyes often wandered to the horizon. She listened closely to stories of far-off places, of ships and cities she couldn't yet pronounce. No one could have guessed it then, but soon, Ethel would leave that quiet village and never truly look back. In the spring of 1927, when Ethel was just 17, a letter arrived, sealed in navy blue and stamped with an unfamiliar crest. It wasn't addressed to her, but she opened it anyway. It was from a family stationed in India seeking a nanny for their young children. Her older cousin had declined the offer, but Ethel couldn't stop rereading the words. India. A world away from Hampshire. The idea felt absurd, and yet it stirred something deep inside her. That night, she sat in the garden, listening to the breeze move through the hedges. For the first time, her familiar world felt small. The chickens clucked in their coop, the kettle whistled inside, but her thoughts were already elsewhere. By the end of that week, without much ceremony, Ethel packed a small case, said a quiet goodbye, and boarded a ship alone. She didn't know what waited across the sea, but something told her life was about to change. The journey to India lasted nearly 3 weeks. Ethel had never been on a ship before, let alone one filled with officers, diplomats, and strangers with accents she could barely understand. The heat grew heavier the farther they sailed, clinging to her skin like wet linen. In Bombay, the air buzzed with noise, color, and smells she'd never imagined: spices, diesel, blooming jasmine. Her new role as a nanny seemed simple enough at first. But the house was large and the rules were many. She often felt watched by the other staff, and the children's mother, though polite, kept her at a distance. Letters from home arrived less frequently. The comfort of Hampshire faded quickly. Sometimes at night, Ethel stood at the veranda and stared at the monsoon clouds rolling over the hills, wondering if she'd made a mistake or if this was just the beginning of something far bigger than she could see. One humid evening in late 1928, nearly a year after she arrived, Ethel overheard something that shifted everything. The children were asleep, and she was passing by the drawing room when she heard the words "leaving by year's end, permanent post in Singapore." The family was planning to relocate, and they hadn't mentioned a word to her. For the first time, Ethel felt unmoored. She'd crossed oceans, given her youth to a household that now might abandon her without a thought. Instead of waiting for answers, she took action. The next morning, she walked to the small British consulate and asked about clerical work. It was bold, unexpected, but they offered her a trial. And just like that, Ethel's life took a new turn. She left behind the nursery, the careful manners, the waiting. She started writing reports, sorting files, learning how to shape her own place in the world. Sometimes it's not the loud moments that change us, but the quiet ones where we finally choose ourselves. A few months into her new job at the consulate, Ethel stumbled upon a troubling report tucked among routine paperwork. It detailed growing tensions in the region, political unrest, whispers of rebellion, and the uncertain future of British colonial rule. The calm facade she'd come to expect was cracking. This news shook her deeply. The woman who had once found comfort in quiet routines now felt the weight of history pressing down. Fear mingled with anger that the people she cared for might soon face danger, and that she was powerless to protect them. Ethel realized that her life, once confined to small, familiar circles, was now tied to forces far beyond her control. But with that realization came a fierce sense of responsibility. She couldn't turn away, not now, not ever. Tensions escalated quickly. The consulate received urgent warnings of unrest spreading through the region. Ethel found herself at a crossroads: stay and face an uncertain, possibly dangerous future, or leave behind everything she had built to return to England. Her superiors urged evacuation, but leaving meant abandoning those who depended on her, including local friends she had quietly come to care for. The quiet woman who once followed orders was now forced to decide between safety and loyalty, between fear and courage. In the stillness of her small room, Ethel wrestled with the weight of the choice, knowing it could change everything: her life, her purpose, her legacy. One evening, as tensions reached a boiling point, word came that the consulate was under threat. A trusted colleague, someone Ethel had confided in, suddenly disappeared without explanation. Rumors swirled of spies and betrayals, and the feeling of safety vanished like mist. Ethel felt the crushing weight of loneliness and fear. She was far from home, surrounded by uncertainty, unsure who to trust. It seemed as if everything she had fought for might crumble in an instant. But in the darkest moments, a quiet strength stirred within her, a resolve to survive, to protect what little she could, and to keep hope alive, even if it was just a fragile thread in the storm. Sometimes, hope is the most courageous act of all. As the unrest slowly eased, Ethel found herself standing at a new beginning. She chose to stay in the city, no longer just a visitor or a caretaker, but a trusted member of the community. With the help of local friends and new colleagues at the consulate, she rebuilt her life, quietly, steadily, one day at a time. The fear and uncertainty didn't vanish overnight, but she learned to face each challenge with quiet courage. It wasn't about heroic acts or grand gestures, but small moments: an encouraging word, a steady hand, a warm smile. Ethel's journey was a testament to resilience and grace. Through every hardship, she grew stronger, teaching those around her that the greatest strength often comes from simply refusing to give up. Years later, Ethel returned to England, carrying with her the quiet wisdom of a life well-traveled and deeply felt. The world she left behind had changed, and so had she. Simple routines no longer seemed small; they were reminders of strength, survival, and love. Yet, the memories of distant lands and hard choices lingered, shaping who she was. Now, at 115, she reflects on a century of change, loss, and unexpected joys. Her story reminds us that life rarely goes as planned, and that sometimes the hardest moments reveal our truest selves. Have you ever had to leave something important behind to find your own way? What did you learn from it?